Okay, welcome back then. We've passed term. It is early June, and incidentally, I had no idea that my last video would be as long as it was. I don't know how it ended up being an hour and a half. It's hard to gauge whilst you're kind of doing the video how long it lasts, because you're sort of pausing between turns and so on. And it only covered about 3 months, the same as most other kind of, sort of videos that last about half out of 40 minutes. So I must have rambled on an excessively large amount. But anyway, we'll try and make this video slightly shorter, see how it sort of pans out. But yeah, in early June, past term, no significant action. So Hussein Avni is continuing to besiege Cattaro. We're kind of moving supply, we're moving a cavalry division actually, which has been reconstructed in Zvornik. We're also moving supply convoys up from both, well, Smyrna originally. This convoy is now in Varna, or Amelia, I should say. And we're going to get these this supply train into Sofia. It is already full, but we're going to get it kind of its organisation up and cohesion up so that it can effectively move again, and then we'll push that up to link up with one of these forces up here. That said, their supply problems seem to be largely resolved now. So yeah, with that in mind, I think this supply train we're actually going to put inside Zvornik, and hopefully it will be good enough for it to be there to kind of collect some supplies. There we've got the reserve division, which is gradually being trained and turned into a regular force. Also, we've got the cavalry division, which has been reconstructed. That's being sent to link up with Hussein Avni. And what else have we got here? Yeah, and the supply train that we've just put inside the fortress. The plan remains the same. However, we can see that on the Dalmatian coastline, a large Austrian force that has been assembled, likely to try and push south to lift the siege on Cattaro. If it engages Hussein Avni's force, it will be supported by Omar Pasha. The other option, of course, is I could actually just launch an offensive. Our position, I mean, doing that would leave Abdul Karim's force momentarily vulnerable, but he has the river line to protect him. Furthermore, the Austrian force in Slavonian has gone on walkies. We don't know where it's gone. It may have just fallen back into Hungary, maybe to collect other forces, or before it moved east into Sombor, but it's not currently in Slavonian as far as we can see. So the opportunity does exist actually for us to move Omar Pasha onto the offensive, move into Dalmatia, and engage the Austrian force under Mitrovic before that moves south, kind of catch them on the back foot. And so there are a lot of good reasons to do that. One, that Omar Pasha is a significant, I mean, he's a better offensive commander than he's a defensive commander. He's still a pretty good defensive commander, but it's only going to take him like 6 days. So I'm going to think on that for a moment or two. As I say, the supply situation is good for all three of these formations. They're all in pretty good shape. The longer Hussein Avni stays in Cattaro, the more damage he's going to do to the fortress, and eventually we'll look to kind of press an assault on the fortress. This Austrian cavalry brigade continues to tie up forces far in excess of its own force, plus the fact that there is what looks to be an army corps, an Austrian corps, sitting in Montenegro, not engaging the Montenegrin force, probably set to evade combat. And that's a problem, of course, because they could move into Kosovo or Albania. So we have forces scattered around to kind of screen that, because this is our kind of interior, and we do want to protect it. So that is a little bit frustrating. I think we're going to keep a cavalry division in Kosovo and move Osman up to cover the ground outside the fortress at Zvornik, just in case this corps decides to move north and become a disruptive element there. But yeah, going to have a think about what to do for a moment or two in the kind of on the western front. My inclination is to go on the offensive here. As I say, I think we're likely to do more damage as a 6-day march. Omar Pasha's force gets a 2% command penalty, given the size of his force. It's a substantial force, 95,000, 16,000 horse, 462 cannons. We're going to be going up against a force of a similar size. We don't know what it's supported by. There could indeed be another Austrian army at Fiume or something like that. But if it goes within a couple of rounds of combat, we should have Hussein Avni can march to the sound of the guns and offer support. So food for thought there. In Palestine, or I should say in Lebanon, we've had a couple of engagements with the rebels, both of them successful, but it's not enough. That rebel force, the Maronites, are about 5,000. We need a larger force, really. We've got a division here which was defeated in its attempted landing We're going to keep both of these formations on a defensive posture for the time being, holding at all costs, so that we hold the ground in Beirut, but at the same time we can begin to enjoy some measure of kind of reorganization of these forces. And in Aden, we've got Zarif Pasha's army moving south. It's 1 day away. It has undergone a bit of disorganization because for whatever reason his force was delayed. The ETA has overrun. It was meant to take him 15 days. He should have arrived there by now, but yeah, he's been delayed, so his force has endured some disorganization. But we want to get him to Aden as soon as possible, mainly because this is really our source of supplies. Having him sitting in Sana'a, the longer he sits there, the more kind of precarious his supply situation becomes. So we want to get him into Aden to lift the siege at Aden, and hopefully we have enough forces to do that. His mixed force is just under 20,000 men. It's 2 marine brigades, a cavalry division, and 2 batteries or 2 regiments of field artillery, incidentally captured from the rebels. It's ironic that the most kind of industrial component, really, of our of our force is actually guns that have fallen into our possession. But that's it. In terms of on the combat front, that's it. Now, economically, this is where the source is at the moment, I think, in a lot of ways, because we've now developed a continuous rail line connecting Constantinople to Adrianople, and it's very easy to think, in a kind of gamey sense, that this is just one rail line that connects, Constantinople to Adrianople. It's not. When you build a railroad inside a province, what it in effect is a network that connects towns, smaller settlements to the city, but not just that. It connects, factories up to depots and harbours. And if you've ever seen a kind of photograph of a kind of 19th century factory complex, you can see that they're replete with kind of, railroad sidings and smaller dedicated locomotives designed to kind of nudge, push, kind of like, huge quantities of coal and raw materials. And that's the key thing. I mean, like, railroad development is an absolutely qualitative change in terms of our productive capacity. There's no way that you can really overstate this. Before railroads, there is simply no real way of moving large quantities of heavy industrial materials, coal, iron, steel, these kinds of things, in any kind of serious quantity, at any kind of speed. I mean, the closest thing you had to it in kind of northwestern Europe, in the UK and Holland and places like that, would have been canals, and it's no accident that early railroad development in Britain tended to follow canal lines. But I mean, canal sort of boats would have moved at the same speed actually as horses. In fact, they were towed. They weren't self-propelled. They were towed by horses on a towpath. And in any case, they would have only been able to, haul a fraction of the kind of commodities, like kind of heavy industrial sort of resources that railroads can haul. And indeed, the kind of canals that you'd have had in Italy would have been more municipal in character. They wouldn't have been industrial canals designed to sort of haul goods. So it's a huge qualitative leap. It dramatically increases the productive yield of our factories, of our agricultural enterprises, and this makes our economy at a stroke, as I mentioned in previous videos, much more resource hungry. Almost at instantly, really. We've kind of far exceeded the kind of guild-based economy capacity to produce things like coal and iron very, very quickly. The small amount of kind of coal and iron that's produced in the background, which actually allowed us to be a coal exporting power up until now, that's far been, that's exceeded very, very quickly. And that's only on the basis of railroads in Constantinople and Adrianople. Now, to be clear, this is an economy of real combined, uneven development. It's very unbalanced. Most of our industrial development is focused on Constantinople, Smyrna, Bursa, and a small amount of development in Sinop. But it is very, very heavily centralized, and it means that railroad development here is going to kind of result in a more profound change in terms of sort of resource consumption. But if we look at inorganic resources, if we look at something like coal, so we've got structure expenses. Okay, so structure expenses aren't that dramatic. Let's have a look. That said, when you first load a game up, so structure expenses for coal, sorry, not iron, 17. Crafts production is 14. Plus railroads, recoaling ships, and railroad usage eats 4. So essentially it's 10 against 17, so we're going to be losing 7 units of coal per turn. And that went from us really making 1 or 2 units of coal per turn, allowing us to stockpile a significant amount of coal and even export it. We're now running at a coal deficit. And various productions, so crafts production is 5. Structure expenses 9, structure production 1, so it's 6. That means we've got a deficit of 4 on iron, and of course we built one capitalist sort of mine extraction point in Bulgaria, but that's not connected to railroads. It has a very low efficiency. It's only 1 unit. That means that the kind of coming focus really for our economy is going to be to sort of develop the hinterland a bit more. We've got access to coal at Zonderlag and Ankara, and it means that we're going to stretch this railroad network into Ankara and up towards Sinop, and to develop large-scale coal mining operations in Zonderlag and Ankara. We should bear in mind that coal mines, like any kind of mine, can be gradually upgraded over time, so their kind of yield will increase gradually. But also, things like railroads, these aren't static kind of, not like in a lot of games you put a railroad and that's it, your armies can move a bit faster sort of thing, and you get a 25% or some sort of silly kind of increase in. It's different. I mean, like railroads develop over time, like like you go through periods of qualitative change, or we will, where you'll have more complex, more elaborate locomotives that can move at a much faster pace, new theories in terms of how railroads are utilized and this sort of thing more effectively and rationalized, I suppose, which means that railroads themselves will eat more coal, but will also be more effective in terms of increasing the yield of our sort of production sites. But we've got a lot of railroads in development, of course, a continuous rail line being developed really from Constantinople all the way through to Salonika and Izmit Bursa to Smyrna. And Smyrna, the Smyrna section is going to be complete within a month, and we're going to be looking within a year. We'll have a continuous line going up through Izmit Bursa to the kind of Asian side of Constantinople. So that's the next plan really, is to try and develop the interior, Sinop and Ankara, but also Zonderlag. We're going to be looking to develop railroads, coal, and also manufactories in Sinop. And yeah, and also maybe even things like Konya. We've actually got a silk, what would you call a silk orchard? Okay, a silk orchard in Konya. Incidentally, interesting, silk featuring in Anatolia is a byproduct of the earliest example, I believe, of economic kind of intrigue, economic espionage, and it goes right back to the time of Justinian, the kind of early days of the East Roman Empire after the West had collapsed, where the Byzantines wanted to have their own, their own capacity to produce silk. They used a lot of silk. The royal court did. So they sent some monks to China under the guise of kind of making contact with the imperial court. But their real brief was to kind of find out the alchemy of silk production, how this stuff was made. And yeah, they brought some silkworms back, some eggs, and yeah, they kind of figured out, they observed the process of silk production, and yeah, they made it back to Byzantium and revealed this process, and so silk production began in the Byzantine Empire, albeit it was generally considered a poor quality silk. People that knew a lot about silk at the time, anyway, could determine the difference between Chinese silk and Byzantine silk. But anyway, there we go. So yeah, silk production, and it's still, silk is still a luxury item even during this period. So looking to increase the production of silk with railroads in Konya would also be absolutely worthwhile. Once this has happened, once we've got kind of Sinop, Ankara, and the kind of western part of the Anatolian Peninsula developed in terms of its infrastructure, in terms of coal mining, also a couple of other factories we're going to be looking at, for example, if we look at our map, luxury goods factories. The reason being is this is a really, really high yield item in terms of the kind of private revenue it can give us each turn. Getting one of those in Smyrna, possibly one in Ankara, would be absolutely a worthwhile exercise. So we're going to be looking to do that. And that will also eat a little bit of our manufactured goods. We produce a surplus of manufactured goods at the moment that we can't really export enough on the domestic market. It's amazing to think that we've gone from, in sort of 6 years, 3-4 years ago, we were trying to kind of like hoover any manufactured goods up from the excuse me, from the international market, and we've got cross production of 11, national market sales 4, expenses and unit maintenance 1, structures production 21, structures expenses 1, so yeah, we're kind of we're shifting these on the international market. Just this term, we had a really good round economically. 10 use of manufactured goods to the UK for 40, a 2 to Austria. It's funny that even when you're at war, you can still trade with powers. I think that's quite realistic, actually. Even in the Second World War, that was happening, you know, albeit often by proxies. But nothing stands in the way of private enterprise. Yeah, so let's have a look. Yeah, so export 65 units of goods at 188, 63 units of goods on the national market for 204. And if I have a quick look at, been keeping kind of records. So yeah, go back to, for example, April 51. Exports stood at something on average around 32 units of goods at 93, so it's almost double that. And yeah, domestic market sales often something like 51 at 194. Value of stock was sitting around 1,500. I mean, value of stock now is like 5,756. So it's probably fair to say that we're much more accumulating kind of raw materials and stock than we are shifting it, but we are shifting it. We can see the transactions making a difference also in terms of our tax revenue. So things are really heating up economically. The Industrial Revolution proper has definitely arrived in the Ottoman Empire now, the railroads, but it means that we need to start having a careful thought about steel, coal and iron. Also timber. You know, the Industrial Revolution doesn't mean that you use less timber. In fact, it means that we actually burn through a lot more timber. Huge amounts of timber was used in the construction of railroads and the constructions of factories, especially at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and we don't have a huge amount of timber. And already we're outstripped our kind of crafts production of timber. So our guild-based economy can no longer sustain long-term our industrial development, which means that we have to find raw materials using basically modern RGOs, much more so now, and that's going to be something that will shape our economic planning as we go forward. With that out of the way, I should say in terms of foreign policy, I've sent a proposed state visit to the UK, always looking to kind of shore up our relations with Britain, yeah, as best we can. And it looks like Baden, Bavarian Saxony have got a white peace with Piedmont, Sardinia, but that's only because they've just not really committed any forces. They're not engaged in any kind of military action with Piedmont, Sardinia. That might happen with us at some point, but the good likelihood is they'll kind of redeclare war in support of Austria. And Piedmont, Sardinia are still holding out. They're still doing well. They hold Milan, which they did not hold, and they also hold Venice. So yeah, they've done very well, much better than I had imagined. You know, when did the war start? May last year. You know, we're more than a year into the war, and Piedmont, Sardinia are still very much in the game. Austria still controls Savoy. This is obviously isolated, and this is also beneficial because this is an area claimed by France. So this kind of, as is Nice, incidentally, but it means that France gets an automatic casus belli against Austria, which is a good chance they would have had anyway, not least because they've just had a political kind of crisis with Austria, but it means that they're a little bit more likely to move on the side of Piedmont, Sardinia if they think they can get Chambéry, or however it's pronounced, Savoy, from Austria, which is, you know, controlled by Austria at the moment. But two decisions. We're not going to be impulsive, but I think we are going to attack. The reason being is Omar Pasha is an effective, aggressive commander. Looking at the shape of this force, it's just being assembled. It looks a little bit unorganized. Matrovitz doesn't look like a very good commander. Now, we don't know what support he's got, but we can draw on support from Hussein Avni. So to that end, we're going to move Omar Pasha. He's going to set to offensive. He's going to set to all-out attack, and he's going to engage Mitrovitz's force. Mitrovitz's force looks like it's not, its composition is not terribly well, it's not very good. It's a little bit kind of manpower heavy. It means it's likely to be larger than Omar Pasha's force, but with a significant command penalty. He's got 3 army corps, reserve cavalry divisions, infantry brigade, mixed kind of forces, but also 3 reserve corps, which is interesting. There's supply trains also. But this force is, there's also other forces there. Karl Ferdinand Corps also. But I fancy Omar Pasha's chances here. As I say, he can draw on Hussein Avni, march to the sound of the guns effect. These forces in good shape. Why sit there and wait for the Austrians to attack? You know, for the moment, Abdelkrim Nadir looks like he's in an okay position. And in any case, Omar Pasha can move back, which he will be doing. So I don't think we're going to be risking too much by doing this. And I prefer aggression. I don't want Cattaro to become open again. I don't want them to try and sneak forces through in the midst of a large battle into Montenegro and open up a more kind of developed operation in the southern Balkans. The small forces they have here are problematic enough in terms of tying up brigades and even division-sized forces, which I don't like. And the hope is that this summer we're going to get this resolved and we're going to set a cordon up around Montenegro. But as long as we hold our position in Cattaro, we keep besieging that. Once that fortress is taken, that's basically a done deal. That for any more kind of Austrian kind of moves through Montenegro, which I don't like. So we're going to be aggressive. We're going to use Omar Pasha's kind of excellence in kind of maneuver warfare, speed, aggression, poise, all these things that served us very well. Of course, he could be defeated. He's never been defeated in the field yet, but it will happen. It doesn't mean he's not an excellent commander. It just means that we required a bit too much of him that time. But I think in this case, his move's fairly safe. We also are pressed by national morale. You know, national morale now sits at 80. At 75, we start to fall into problems. So we need significant victories in the field. You know, we're not just fighting a practical war. If we were fighting just a practical war, we had all the time in the world, or if our national morale was sitting at 100, I'd probably keep Omar Pasha back in Bosnia-Herzegovina. I'd be much more cautious. But a large victory in the field might give us 2 or 3 national morale points. So we have to kind of manage the public perception of this war. Also, which we've not done, you know, but we need to start doing. It means that we have to score victories in the field. Austria's national morale sits at 104, so very disconcerting, you know. And again, this is not an abstract kind of sort of amorphous type of thing. This has concrete ramifications on how effective our forces are in the field. The lower this is, the lower the morale of our forces, the less likely they are to hold out. And even a good commander like Omar Pasha or Hussein Avni, whoever else, you know, there's limits to what they can do with large forces comprised of infantry that have poor morale. So we'll press it. We'll be aggressive now. See if we can score something that'll get us some national morale points. That's it. Going to pass the turn. Pop you on hold, and we'll be back in a moment. In late June. See you on the other side. Okay, welcome back then. Late July. And let's have a look at the action reports for the Dalmatian operation. And it's looking like a story of overwhelming success. So, yeah, absolutely vintage Omar Pasha. Devastating defeat on the Austrians. 50,000 casualties, a shade under. 21,000 casualties for ourselves. Plus we take 3,300 prisoners. It wasn't a small action. It went on for a good 5 rounds. So significant engagement against very large Austrian forces. But it's not limited to that. That battle gives us a national morale point boost. It is a significant, recognized big victory over the Austrians. But in a strange sort of way, the aftermath, it was equally as damaging, albeit in kind of penny packet actions. So there's, it looks like as Austrian forces break off and fall back, they do so somewhat chaotically, losing another 5,000 casualties, only 700 of our own, taking 4,000 prisoners. So essentially there's another 10,000 losses. And that is what, 4 infantry line regiments, plus a labour battalion destroyed, which is excellent. And in addition to that, so that's the first one, that's Larissa. The second engagement at Spalato, Split. Again, another 1,500. That's, 2 light cavalry brigades. Excellent. We do suffer 2,000 casualties ourselves, but take 1,500 prisoners. Another excellent outcome, and then the last kind of chaotic engagement. Yeah, the last one. Again, another sort of 2,900 or 3,000 casualties, just under 36 guns. Plus 1,800 prisoners, and again we suffer about 1,700, just under 2,000 casualties. But the units that we destroy are Engineer Regiment, a Signal Regiment, which we don't even have access to these yet, Military Police, and artillery. So really kind of smashed into a lot of their kind of sort of support asset units that are completely destroying them. They'll have to be reconstructed, and that looks like it was a corps under Edward von Klamm-Gallas. So that's a really good action. It looks like the bulk of the Austrian force pulled back to Fiume and then also up to Zagreb, where it's kind of joined up presumably with other kind of forces. But we've certainly given them a real bloody nose there. We're going to move Omar Pasha back now to Sarajevo, just to kind of consolidate the centre. But yeah, really, really good action, and yeah, just textbook Omar Pasha stuff really. an absolute sort of drubbing for the Austrians. And yeah, really, really good to see. It looks like the March of the Sound of the Guns effect did happen, because his force is about 95,000, but given that it's 175,000 men in the field against about 166,000, we've got a big gun superiority there. Nearly 1,000 cannons. They've got about 568. But yeah, you can see from the stats, I mean, Mitrovic is just completely outclassed by a more experienced general leading a much more experienced army. But yeah, excellent outcome, exactly what I want to see. But the key thing is get Omar Pasha back in the centre so that you can kind of shore up support for either flank. The siege at Cattaro continues. It will be a long and drawn out and bloody affair. One problem with Cattaro, of course, is it can be supplied from the sea, so we're going to have to get the main fleet into blockade soon. And what we'll do is, when the fleet is ready, which it's not yet, we'll split it into two, and we'll kind of take it in turns basically, and having half of the fleet sitting in a port nearby recovering and half sitting outside Cattaro to maintain a kind of constant blockade. But yeah, the fleet requires more time to kind of organise itself. But yeah, outstanding action. Really, really good news. It's the same with the raiding fleet also. In terms of the other actions then, it was a victory against the Yemenis, inflicting just 2,500 casualties, taking just under 2,000 ourselves. Yeah, one round of combat, that's good. They've not fallen back. They're still in the region. We're going to set, well, we're not activated, so Zarif is going to have to sit in a kind of defensive posture, but we're regaining military control over the region, and we can start drawing on supplies from the harbour there soon enough. So that's good to see also. And if we scroll down, I think, was there another action? No, that is it. Oh, hang on. I'm lying. Larissa, there we go, yeah. A small action against this kind of light cavalry brigade comprised of 2 regiments, 200 casualties. They've only got 850 men. But yeah, that's good. They've been pushed into sort of Salonika. They obviously can't take the fort because it is a fort with a big garrison, but we're going to move forces into Salonika. The key thing is to corner them, destroy that force, and hopefully when it's done, it's done. But they're doing a good job of evading combat, moving around. It's a light force. It doesn't really require much in the way of supplies, so we can draw supplies from the area it moves through. And yeah, it's doing this business of tying up forces. But once it's destroyed. Then we'll kind of cordon off Montenegro. And we can see that the force in Montenegro is now beginning to work its way through its supplies. An army corps, which is the size of this force, does require a proper kind of supply infrastructure to maintain it. So that force will be in a really dangerous position soon enough. There's a chance that it might move up into Sarajevo, but Omar Pasha will deal with that, sure enough. So yeah, good news all around. Good news on the kind of combat front. The other development, however, is not positive, and again, it's a kind of scripted event. It's to do with this revolt in Palestine, so the defense of Syrian Christians. To restore law and order in Lebanon and Syria, the Sultan has sent one of the empire's highest dignitaries, Fuad Pasha, to Damascus. Having received emergency powers, he organised an exemplary mass execution. Well, wonderful. On his orders, 111 persons were shot. 57 hanged, 325 sentenced to hard labour, and 145 were banished. Yeah, they weren't like that. The French press continued to rage, claiming the ancient role of France as protector of Christians in the Levant. So, yeah, not good news. This is a running sore, and yeah, it's resulted in a small amount of prestige hit, 15, and yeah, France isn't liking that. 20, so relations have sunk from a high watermark of about 35-40 to 24. So they're still positive, but you know, France is led by a pretty impulsive sort of character, really. Yeah, we don't have any more diplomats for the time being, but as soon as we do, we'll try and do what we can to shore up relations with France, I think. Hopefully, again, their interest will be more piqued by the kind of the Austrians than what's going on in the Levant. Of course, all of this might be the fact that they see this as an opportune moment to intervene in our colonial territories, given our current preoccupation with what's happening in Bosnia. But we'll sort of follow and track that. We would rather not a war with France. I mean, France, for the most part, unlike Austria or Russia, does have to project its power. That's the key thing. I mean, it can maybe roll into kind of roll into sort of our colony in Libya, but other than that, it has to make large landings. It would mean that we'd have to subtract one of our armies to the defence in the interior. But yeah, anyway, we'll follow it closely. But you know, Feels like it's long odds a war with France. That said, we can see forces in the Aegean. So, yeah, keep a careful eye on things, huh? For the time being, no declaration of war anyway. We'll double check that actually when it'll be in a report. But let's have a look. Treaties in effect. Yeah, so the war is limited to Austria and its kind of client states for the time being. Okay, good round economically then. Pretty similar kind of exports to the last turn. 172, slight drop, 58 units of goods for 172, 63 for 196 for domestic market sales, imports 13 for 52. That's good. Always selling about 7 to the colonies. Yeah, that's fine. We've got a bit of private capital accumulated now, and let's have a look at what other production sites we can build with that. 856 for a luxury goods shop, 63 manufactured goods, 31 steel, 10 coal. It might cost a bit more than that in Smyrna. Let's have a look. Leaves us at 291. We do need a luxury goods shop. It's something we've been looking at for a while, partly to begin to convert. It's like another process of conversion, really. It's converting manufactured goods into a kind of higher form of manufactured goods that are sold to kind of, as you can imagine, aristocrats, the ruling class, capitalists, and the sort of petty bourgeois, maybe sort of upper middle class, for just a much high, much kind of higher income yield. So it'll increase domestic market sales. It's being built in an area that's going to have railway support as well. So once this factory is built, it'll be it'll be a really, really highly efficient site. That's going to be okay. I mean, 291 left. Our operating costs sit at 164 for the time being. Even with imports, that's going to be good enough. Happy with that. Let's have a quick look at steel imports. Sitting at 5, North Germany. We're going to increase steel imports to 15 for just a couple of turns, because steel is now sitting at 38. That's quite low. Manufactured goods is okay. Yeah, we'll just focus on steel for the time being. Iron is kind of gradually dropping off. What I might do actually is start addressing that. We want to basically make sure that we always have a bit of a reserve of certain kinds of commodities like iron and coal. I think once coal gets to about 100, we'll try and import about 10 to 15 units of coal. We're going to start importing iron as well. 4, 5, 6, 7. So we only really need to import 3 units of iron per turn to meet demand. Let's have a look. Yeah. And there's really good regular access to that in northern Germany. So we'll keep that as a kind of permanent thing for the time being. We don't have a lot of domestic access to iron and not enough guild-based production for it to be kind of sort of sustainable, really, at sort of 47. It means we've always got 47. If suddenly, unlikely, but if suddenly iron dries up on the international market, we always kind of we have a bit of a buffer. At least it will keep us in good stead for probably a few months, 2 to 3 months. We've still got quite a lot of coal, so we'll start eating into our reserve, and then we're going to start beginning to look at imports. We'll start importing 10 units, I think, across the board from where we can. Yeah, actually, we won't do it this turn. We'll wait till we get slightly more private capital accumulated. Once we get to about 100, I think we'll begin to gradually increase imports of coal. So we've always got a decent reserve to fall back on if there's a sudden kind of international shortage. Okay, let's set a kind of trade balance for the turn then. We're going to 11. We've got 88 manufactured goods. That's good. Got a lot of textiles building up now. Yeah, that's good. Close enough for government work, I think. Supply. Yeah, we are supplementing what is a fairly considerable indigenous supply production by importing a little bit. Manufactured goods. That's a worthwhile thing to check. Then we can see here, this is what happens when there's basically a deficit. If we take into account all exports of manufactured goods, if we export all of those, we simply would not have enough left for domestic consumption at its current rate. So the way that we do that is, there we go, we're going to put it to 70. So next turn stock will sit at 70. We don't know. Yeah, we'll leave it at 70 for now. So with domestic consumption sort of estimates, projections if you like, combined with what we have available for export, which we're holding back basically for export, yeah, we would have 7 left. That's fine. Okay. Yeah, that's it. In terms of military moves, then we're going to keep both the raiding fleet and the main fleet in port just for another fortnight, I think. Get Omar Pasha's force back into Sarajevo. Sarajevo will now produce a generic kind of garrison force, which means that it's unlikely to fall in one turn. It's going to take him 12 days, plus he'll get a 3 or 4 day rest period once he's there, and then in any case he's going to sit tight in Sarajevo outside the fort to begin to receive some replacements for the losses he sustained and get some more supplies up. Supplies are looking good now. We've got a nice kind of system going. So we've got 2 supply wagons in the fortress of Zvornik that are full, and plus another 2 in Sofia, which are full. Plus we've got another 2 which are arriving in Sofia in 3 days. We'll get them to enter. Yeah, they'll enter Sofia once they're there. So we're going to begin to sort of move these up, I think. So let's get 2 moving up to Zvornik. Yeah, that's fine. Good. So we've got sort of we've got a nice kind of supply system working its way up now, and I think we're going to probably stop doing that because we're in a position now where it looks like we're able to supply. Supply is a little bit determined also by things like weather. You know, poor weather in the autumn and the winter turns these tracks and poor quality roads into kind of quagmire, and it makes it much harder for our forces to be supplied. So okay, everything's fine economically. We've sent diplomats to propose a state visit in the UK. They've not replied to that yet, of course. Prussia is agitating in support of unification in Holstein. Okay. To be expected, I suppose. Prussia and Germany is, of course, a long-term prospect as an ally, for more reasons than one, but we'll sort of deal with that some years from now. Okay, no other significant develops on the international front as far as I can see. No significant wars have broken out or anything like this. Russian forces less visible on the border. Good to see. Let's have a quick look at what's happening in the north in Sweden. Sweden, of course, is experiencing a rather difficult time now, with both the Russians and Prussia involved. Russia and Prussia working closely together is not desirable, of course. But no real significant developments there. But it looks like Stockholm is increasingly kind of isolated from the rest of their kind of interior, what would become Norway, I suppose, years from now. But okay. Right, that's it. Going to put you back on pause. I'm going to pass turn, and I shall see you in, late June now. So it'll be early July. See you on the other side. Okay, welcome back then, early July. And no significant developments on the Western Front then. Omar Pasha is back in Sarajevo. And yeah, that's fine. We can promote one of the commanders. I mean, no rush to do that necessarily. I don't want to have lots of 3-star generals. One of the problems being is that even though theoretically seniority should determine who the leader of a stack is, sometimes for whatever reason the game gets confused. So I'm happy to keep 2 of these commanders as lieutenant generals, 2 stars for the time being. Hussein Avni's siege continues. Cattaro, the structure's intact, so we're not going to press for an assault at this moment in time. We're seeing a bit of supply depletion in Omar's stack and also Abdul Karim Nadir's stack. So to that end, let's have a look at what we have available supply wise. So we're going to split this into 2. We're going to send one up to Abdul Karim Nadir, and then we're going to send the other Okay, that's Abaku again. We're sending other than to Omar Pasha. And that'll be 9 days. And we've got another 2 supply trains arriving in Zvornik, where they're going to enter the fortress once they're in Zvornik. That's good to see. So, yeah, the chasing down of this cavalry brigade continues. Let's keep an eye on Albania, because this corps is probably going to move into Albania. It's a real temptation to declare war on force march. 70% chance. Let's do that. Let's do that. I mean, we have got a reserve corps in the last analysis sitting inside the fortress of Zvornik, and anyway, we can move Omar Pasha back to clear Zvornik out very easily if we have to. So that's fine. Yeah, so let's move Osman down then, just to hold a position in Tirana. May be an opportunity to engage this corps. Actually, they won't be able to take Tirana directly, not straight away anyway, because there is actually a fortress garrison in Tirana. So we continue to kind of move forces around, lots of little formations to try and corner this cavalry brigade, and ultimately kind of deal with it. In terms of engagements, we engaged the rebels outside Beirut. Heavier casualties for this time then, 1,200, and you know they started off with 4,800. So we're going to start whittling this force down. This time we've set both a division and a brigade to offensive posture. And they're going to be engaging and hopefully finishing off, kind of delivering the coup de grace on these rebels in Lebanon. And we do want this wrapped up, because we don't want this situation kind of sprawling and getting worse than it already has, frankly. Yeah, luxury goods shop began in Smyrna. That's fine. Okay, that's just Palestine. That's a promotable rank. Good round economically. I have already looked through the kind of economic indices. So we're importing steel, supply, iron, shifting 12 units of manufactured goods this turn. That's really good. 11 units of tobacco. That's really nice to see. So we're starting to shift the kind of backlog of tobacco that we built up. 8 dye, fruits, fish, cereals, and we're importing a small amount of tea and rice, and also some supplies in the United States. Tea and rice from Japan, just to kind of broaden our population's access to kind of agricultural food stuff. So 70 units of goods for export at 209 this turn. That exceeds, both in quantities of goods shifted and revenue, the amount that we generated in domestic market sales. That's really good to see. And a lot of that would be, of course, tobacco. We should be starting to really shift tobacco now. Imports 28 units for 104. Really nice round economically, that. Happy with that. Let's have a quick look through. Yeah, so really shifting tobacco now. Let's just set our exports, and then we'll quickly check our resource balance to make sure everything is kind of sound. What are we on? 103 manufactured goods. So we're set to hold back 50, export anything beyond that. We also want to make sure we've got 50 manufactured goods. Coal is now 124. So once we get to 100, we'll start looking to kind of maintain around 70 to 100, I think. Right, we're going to turn conversion of preserved foods back on now. Yeah, everything's satisfactory enough there. Let's just check our kind of assets balance really quick. So even with conversion, we'll still have enough cereals and fish and stuff left over after. That's good to see. Okay, yeah, sitting just under 500 private capital then. Nice. We quickly made up our steel kind of deficit. We're sitting around 30 something steel, I think, last turn. And we've still kind of got popular, got sort of manpower increase. We're gradually kind of accumulating officers and junior rank soldiers. At some point I'm thinking of building another guard corps. We've got one guard corps which is sitting in Omar Pasha's command. I'm thinking of getting one also for Hussein Avenue, which should relieve maybe these 2 divisions, which can be used to kind of hold the interior or something like that. We'll have a think on that, but we need 60. 63 or 64 officers, I think, for a guard corps. 68 officers, so we're a little way off yet, but it won't be long before we're there. The other thing, though, is I'm also thinking of an additional cavalry division. It's a huge amount of resources this brigade is tying up. It shows the amount of damage that can be done if you can get a small force behind kind of or into the enemy's interior. Really, really frustrating. So our war score is gradually increasing against Austria now. I suspect that is because we control Dalmatia. So that's going to be the key thing. It sits at -13. We want to basically get it up to kind of 0 or above, and we can start dictating terms. I think once Cattaro has fallen, this will free up a third of our army. That will then begin to mean that we can start conducting more kind of fluid operations, I think, to the north. We'll kind of, again, wheel the left flank around, begin to zero in on Zagreb using both Hussein Avni and Omar Pasha, probably from Bihać towards Zagreb, and then sort of, it's a surprisingly short distance, really, through not the worst terrain. And if we could pull this off late summer, sort of September, October, that'd be really nice. But yeah, Zagreb, then Marburg, and then Vienna. That'd be really nice. And then we can even maybe Abkarim try and get him over the Sava again and get him to conduct operations in sort of central Hungary. But we'll address that when the opportunity presents itself. Let's have a quick look at the fleet, see what situation it's in, because we do want to kind of yeah, that's good enough now. It's reorganized, it's got supplies, it's got everything it needs to have. We're going to be looking at a significant fleet expansion program at some point soon as well. Alright, 12 days. We'll settle for that. Let's have a look if there are any Austrian fleets. No, there's nothing. And no indication of further Austrian raiding maneuvers either, actually. So we're going to bring the raiding fleet up also. And then once we consolidated our position, I might even begin the building of a fortress at Tirana, and that means that we can begin to use the harbour there, maybe even increase the size of the harbour, so we can basically use this as a bit more of a naval base, a westerly kind of naval base for operations in the Adriatic. It means that we can switch out forces, resupply them a bit more effectively in Tirana and this sort of thing. Okay, that's good. So all of our economic measures have been taken. We're still sitting at 81 national morale. We lose one from war weariness. We get one back from will and national resilience. That's good. Economic measures have been set. Let's quickly look at Austria's national morale. 96. That's because of the loss of Dalmatia, I reckon. Good to see. It means they're trying to take Dalmatia back. Inflation is at 3. Happy with the tax sliders for the time being. We're getting a really nice revenue. We've got 4 diplomats. Now, one thing I want to look at actually really quickly is because it's easy to kind of let's have a quick look at our colonial options. Not yet. So we need 375 plus a diplomat, which we have. We've got to start looking to convert these territories into formal colonies, I think. Okay, let's have a look at what we can kind of do there then. So 50 manufactured goods, 50 state revenue. We'll build a fortress there. Let's build a fortress in Jerusalem. And we want to start firming up our position, I think. Okay, a number of colonial fortresses are being built. In addition to that, let's have a look. Let's go for a chief bribing exercise or something. Missions, chief bribing. $15 revenue, 15 private capital for some missions. This will give us some colonial penetration and gradually help pacify the region more. Also, it's a kind of long-term thing. Because we've just kind of used some manufactured goods, let's have a quick look and make sure that manufactured goods is still okay. 38 after. Exports. Exports 7. Anything over 50. Fine, that's good. Yeah, so that's used a bit of state revenue. We're making nice state revenue now on the basis of the numbers of transactions that we're seeing in our economy. That's really, really good. Okay, let's pass turn then. Late July going into, I guess, early August. So yeah, I'll pop you on pause and we'll see you on the other side. Okay, welcome back then. We're in late July now. We've got both of the fleets kind of wheeled around into the Adriatic. We're going to basically use the raiding fleet as a kind of screening force and use the main fleet to coastal bombard the fortress at Cattaro. The siege has been disrupted by this army corps that was in Montenegro. It's fallen back. Unfortunately, Hussein Avni is not in a position to engage it. Hopefully, it's not able to slip past into Dalmatia. Well, the reason I say that is not just because we want to lose Dalmatia, but actually, I'm seeing that we're gradually... War score against Austria increased by 1, now stands at -12. So I think control of Dalmatia is significant for the Austrians because it's basically controlling a sort of a victory location. The problem is to move that force, so for example, Omar Pasha to Dalmatia, kind of upsets things a little bit because it upsets the configuration that we have. It leaves Abdul Karim Nadir sort of on his Todd and vulnerable maybe to a strike from this force, which is a fairly considerable force. Against him, and also leave Sarajevo open. So we'll keep our forces in their current kind of position. Hussein Avni's he's not activated this turn. Hopefully, or we can't activate him this turn. He's not activated, so rather we can't kind of set him to an offensive posture. So we can't clear out the area around Cattaro, which has become disrupted by this corps that's fallen back, and it's also picked up some reinforcements by falling back towards Cattaro. Hopefully, this force will just enter the fortress, which is the only thing it can do, I think. I mean, it might be able to slip past, but if it enters the fortress, that's great. It means when the fort falls, we also bag an entire Austrian army corps into the bargain. So we're going to set the main fleet to sort of shell the fortress. From looking at this fortress, it does have coastal guns, so our ships will be looking to take some damage. That's fine. You know, we've got... Unlike the Crimean War, we've got a really strong sort of economic base to work with now to support our military. So we can start building up. In fact, you know, in anticipation, we're going to build up a few kind of... that's definitely not the right thing I clicked. We're going to build up some sort of parts, repair parts for our fleet. It does actually... we spend prestige points when doing it for capital ships, nonetheless. Let's have a look. 77. We've still got manufactured goods. Yeah, that's fine. We'll build up some repair parts, anticipating some damage to our ships. It's always good to have those in any case. That leaves us with 160, 95 manufactured goods, and we're still got plenty of steel. In terms of engagements, then we engaged the rebels at Beirut. Still not finished the deal, but another 820 casualties. They've only got a force of 3,800, and that was only the brigade-sized force. We've got a division there also in the area. We're going to press for another kind of another offensive. And hopefully we want to kind of like end this as soon as possible. We finally cornered the Austrian cavalry brigade and sealed its fate. That force has been destroyed. 1,500 casualties. It can't be 1,500, can it? It's 15, 10, no, God knows. Anyway, we've destroyed the force. That's good enough for me, and that frees up a lot of these forces now that we've had kind of rear echelon forces that we've had sitting back. We've got cavalry division in Macedonia. Let's begin to move some forces north. We'll keep Osman in Albania for the time being. We're going to move this cavalry division up. We'll set it to evade combat for the time being. And ultimately we're going to move this division up so we can link it up with Abdul Karim Nadir, who has no mobile element in his command because we've detached it. He has got sufficient command points to absorb a cavalry division, and that's exactly what we want to give him. We've got 2 cavalry divisions in Omar Pasha's force and 1 cavalry division in Hussein Avni's force. That's good. That means that all of our commands have a kind of mobile element for reconnaissance, and also for tactical exploitation. If they engage the Austrians and defeat them, they've got a mobile element to run down any Austrian forces while patrolling. Okay, so we're looking at sort of patrol damage to our merchant fleet, not significant. We'll keep an eye on that. Let's give it to our war ministry. We've got 1 sort of repair parts for sort of It says transport, but actually this is merchant fleet, so it requires private capital. We're going to expend a 100 private capital to manufacture goods to ensure that we have another one. So these ships can actually be sort of repaired at sea, because bear in mind they're actually constantly moving. They're moving between ports all the time. That's what the trade box represents, just in this area. They're devoted to this area. So they can be repaired whilst conducting their jobs. They're not like military ships that require time to sit in port, you know. It means that any damage sustained, we can replace that. Yeah, that's it in terms of engagements. Not a huge amount else to report. The main thing now really is all eyes on the left flank at Cattaro, but it was a really nice set piece at Split, and it's really kind of it's given us the elbow room to get this siege underway, and it was huge victory in the field for Omar Pasha, just vintage stuff. And yeah, we're in late July, we're already kind of high summer, so we're sort of a bit behind schedule really, but we need this fortress to fall. I think a bit of shelling from the main fleet. And yeah, just keep Omar Pasha's, Hussein Avni Pasha's force in position. Is going to really be the sort of solution to the kind of Cattaro sort of ulcer, really, a thorn in our side, but it has to fall before we kind of have the liberty really to begin to move forces further north and conduct operations further north. And anyway, it buys us a bit of time. It buys us time to kind of secure our logistics. We're going for let's have a look at depot expansion. 70 days remaining for the fortress to be completed, and then we've got depot extension, 75 days remaining at Zvornik. 60 days for the depot to be completed. That's what, 2 months basically, plus 240 days for the fortress to be completed at Sarajevo. We are gradually kind of improving our logistics situation, so that's good. Let's have a look. Let's have a quick check of right. Alright, we're going to send one of these then to Hussein Avni. And we'll send one to the center. Port Omar Pasha. And we've got 2 here that we'll detach. Send back. Evade combat. Enter fortress. Good. Fine. And then the next kind of focus is going to be Abu Karim Adir for supplies and logistics. Now we have got enough to. Let's get these up into Zvornik. 9 days. Enter the structure once they are there. Good. So it looks a bit of a sort of spaghetti junction going on here. Let's get this cavalry brigade down towards Epiros, cover the coast. Keep these Bashi bazookas to defend, retreat if attacked, to defend. This is a brigade also. We'll keep this brigade, move this brigade up into Kosovo. Okay, good stuff. So we're in late July. I think I'm going to leave it there, and I'll conduct sort of economic administration and such, which is the same as what I do every turn. It's making sure that we have enough kind of resources for our domestic market. We can see we're going to have to make some adjustments for cereals and such, and pick up this the campaign. I guess we're in late July now, so we'll pick up the campaign early August. Will be the next video. Our past turn, we've got no significant military moves other than to hold tight and shell Cattaro. We've got the screening force, of course, protecting the main fleet in the Central Adriatic. And so yeah, I'll end this video here, and I shall see you in early August. Yeah, early August 1856. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.